Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and today we're going to take a look at one of the most daunting aspects of BattleTech, the user interface, specifically the tactical UI. We'll leave the mech bay for another video. The BattleTech UI is very well designed, and as some of you already know, I have a bit of a thing for well done UX and UI, and while the interface here is very well done, in my opinion, it can be quite scary because it's communicating a lot of information at any given time. Hopefully, this guide will make things clear as day. Now we're going to start looking at the interface during a skirmish, but it's pretty similar to single player as well. Top left, you'll have whose turn it is, as well as which round it is, and right below that, you'll have the objectives. In the middle down here in the center, you can see all of the mech warriors you've brought to the field, alongside a bar to the side over here. When you're in skirmish mode, that's a fury bar. The more bad things that happen to your lance, the higher this goes, and then you can use it for various specials. Whereas in single player, the better things that are happening, the higher your morale goes, and then you can use that for special activities. Now again, these are all of your mech warriors, and when you hover over their portraits, you can actually see how many injuries they have sustained and how many they can sustain. Once a mech warrior is completely injured, in the case of Witness here, 4 for 4, that mech warrior and that mech will be out of commission for the rest of the fight. Now when you select one of these mech warriors, you'll actually see a lot of details about their mech as well. At the bottom in the center over here, first off, you can see your standard sort of move orders, attack orders, and there are a few variants as well, depending on the kinds of skills that the mechs have and the mech warriors have as well. We'll cover those in some different videos. This is about the user interface. At the bottom left over here, you can see stats about the mech itself. Up here, you can see a health bar. Now, this is split into two. To the left here, we have structural health, and to the right here, we have armor health, and these are totals. If you hover over the various parts of the mech, you can see specific armor details for these parts, and that's very important to pay attention to because in BattleTech, the damage is dealt to each part individually, and losing an arm or losing a leg is different from losing a torso piece or losing the head. Right above this little section over here, you can see we have this little space over here that'll later be populated by an initiative number. We'll go over that in a bit. And this bar up here is a heat indicator. Now, as your mech does various things, such as fire lasers or get fired upon by flamers, it will start generating heat. Even movement generates heat. If that goes beyond this white indicator over here and this thin orange line, then your mech is starting to overheat, and that's going to cause damage. And if it gets way too high, it might actually completely shut down. Below that bar, you can see over here is a stability bar. Now this indicates just how stable that mech is on its 2 feet. As those things tick up, it will start to get unsteady, and if it hits this threshold, as indicated by this pip over here, it will actually become unsteady, and that'll affect its movement. If this bar ever fills up, it will actually topple over, and you'll have to spend some movement points in getting it up. Now let's quickly just take a look at the mech on the screen here as well, and you can see that just above the mech, we've got the mech warrior name, the mech type, or the mech's name itself. Both of those health bars, in dark we have the structural health, and in white we have the armor health. We've got the heat bar, we've got the stability bar, and we also will have the initiative number over here. So the information is indicated in 2 places. At the bottom right, meanwhile, we have all of the weapons available to this specific mech, and you can turn these weapons on and off simply by clicking on these, and you'll use that later on in combat to preserve heat or to affect who you're firing with which weapon when you're multi-targeting. More on that later though. So you'll see as we go through these different mech warriors and their mechs, the numbers and the weapons are changing, especially when we pick buckshot. Take a look at all of the weapons on this mech over here, and to the left as well, you can see we've got a lot of armor and a lot more structural health on this mech, and again, you can hover over the individual parts to actually see details on where that armor is located. So that should communicate most of the UI over here. We also have right over here some status that is affected by various features such as the stance it might be in or the type of terrain you're standing on. And while Witness over here doesn't have any status applied to him, you can see Buckshot does in fact have guarded and entrenched. Hovering over any of these will bring the tooltips, and those tooltips will be very important if you start forgetting what those symbols look like and what they mean. Now let's take a look at movement. When I have Witness selected, if I move around, you can see it's a very simple sort of user interface in terms of movement. We're in sprint mode right now, and that's because there is no engagement active, and you can see a couple of things actually. As I move this around, you'll notice off in the distance there's this light blue ring that's sort of shimmering. that's the sensor range of this mech, and each mech will have different sensor capabilities, and sensor ranges are important to actually spot the enemy. You might not be able to see what mech they have, but you'll know that they have something there. You can then later use sensor lock, if you have that available on the mech warrior, which will allow you to reveal the mech and then target it with indirect fire. Again, more on that later or in the previous video, my 10 essential tips. Now, you can see these pips on the ground indicate destinations that your mech can actually move into. Where it's white, there are no effects. Where it's green, it means it's a forest, and the forest, as you can see, has certain effects. Where it's blue, it means you're about to take a dip in the water, and that will reduce your movement and also help your heat sinks. And over here, where it's purple, you can see we've got marsh. Now, there's a couple of other terrain types as well. Mineral fields, there's rough terrain as well, and these all have various effects. So make sure you keep an eye on what those effects are before you move a mech through it. Now, as I'm moving this around, you'll notice as well that there are these little chevrons that are showing up right below the word sprint. Now, as I go farther, those chevrons increase in number. The chevrons are evasive pips. The more of those that a mech has, the more defensively capable it'll be. So basically, you want to move farther if it means you'll get more of those pips, because that'll make it harder to hit that mech. It implies that your mech is evading as it's moving. So it makes sense that the farther you go, the more evasive pips you get. Now you'll notice a little thing over here. Just take a look to the right of the Locust LCT-1V and take a look at how that changes as we move forward over here. Now, once I've clicked, I can actually change the facing of the mech as well on arrival, and this will be affected by how far I'm moving. If I'm moving too far during battle, I can't actually do a full 180 turn to run and then face behind me in certain cases. So just be wary of that, and we'll look into this in a bit as well when engagements actually begin. But let me click over here, and as that mech is moving, just keep an eye on its little tag up top over there. When it reaches its destination, you can see it actually adds on its evasive pips. So now those evasive pips have been applied, and this mech is a lot better at defending itself. When it's being shot at, the attacker will have a harder time landing those hits. So this sort of covers the at-ease user interface. We'll take a second to get us into a combat scenario and then take a look at what the combat scenario user interface looks like and how things change. It's not too much. It'll all start making sense. In fact, it's pretty similar. Alright, so our Locust mech here has moved forward far enough so that we can actually detect an enemy mech on the field over here. As a result of that, right now we don't know what the mech is. Well, now we do. Thank you for running into my vision there. But you can see when we don't know what the mech is, it's actually this random little shape over here. We have no idea what we're up against. But this does completely change the user interface. I shouldn't say completely. It changes the user interface a little bit. Instead of done here now, we have the button reserve. Now, clicking on reserve means I'm not looking to move just yet. I want both of these mechs to reserve their movement and their actions until later on in the turn phase. Now, what's the turn phase? Looking up over here, you can see we've got this new bar that's been added. It counts down from 5 to 1, and that's actually the turn order. 5 is reserved for any mech warrior who has a specialist trait that allows them to move even faster, but otherwise you're looking at your lights, your mediums, your heavies, and your assaults. So these slower mechs move last. Now, turn order can be affected by various things, and I went over that in my 10 tips video, so make sure you watch that to get a better understanding for how this works. Now, if I hover over reserve, you can see those two chevrons are actually shifting, and that's to let you know that your friendly units here will now move down to level 3. So they'll move after this mech here that's at level 4. However, I have reason to suspect that this is a level 4 mech. It just moved, and I can actually hit it with sensor lock. So let's select witness over here. We'll use the sensor lock, and because this mech is within this blue line over here, again, that sensor range, I can see that it's there, but I don't know what it is. So we're going to click on it here, say, yes, I do in fact want to sensor lock, and now this mech will be revealed. And I've dropped down 2 of its evasion pips. That's how sensor lock works. And you'll notice one more thing as well as this other enemy mech moves in. So apart from just reducing its sensor lock, or rather its evasive pips here, you can also see these 2 blue chevrons that have been added on top of this number here. Now, those blue chevrons represent that this has been sensor locked, just so you're aware of the situation. Now, the enemy mech, as you can see, is represented very similarly to a friendly mech. Let's take a look at these things side by side. So again, these numbers here and here and in the case of Blockade here, it's lit up because he hasn't moved yet. You can see where in that initiative phase this mech will fall. And when you're able to see more than just one enemy mech, you can use that to help influence how you approach a turn, because you'll know which mech moves in which order, especially overarchingly across this entire sort of back and forth of turns. Now, again, let's just take a look at this enemy mech over here, because I might want to open shots at it, and let's figure out what we're up against here. So if I actually right-click on a mech, and any mech, it could be a friendly mech or it can be an enemy mech, I can see what's going on here. Not only can I see its type, I can see who's piloting it, or in the case of single player, the rank of the person piloting it. I can see armor, I can see the loadout, I can see all the various stats, the same as I could see for myself, including heat, stability, and the various status effects that it's under the influence of currently. And I can use those various pieces of information to influence what I do exactly. So that's the situation right now. With Blockade, unfortunately, we don't have any weapons that'll actually let me land any shots, and you can see as I try to move around, I can't make any contact with any of my weapons. If that was the case, there would be red lines to showcase that. And we'll take a quick cut, and I'll show you how that looks. Alright, now it's time for Buckshot to move in her Thunderbolt. And as you can see, when I move the movement reticule here around, I have this little red line, this arched red line showing a path from my destination to that enemy mech that we spotted and sensor locked earlier. That's to tell me that there is actually an indirect line of fire. Now, not all mechs can fire with an indirect line. This is only because the Thunderbolt here is armed with these LRMs, long-range missiles, and these are indirect weapons. Now, as I'm moving around, you'll notice a couple of things. For one, there are two little arrows on either side of that enemy mech, and you'll see as I move this around, it changes color. That color is to indicate the effectiveness of my weapons and how many of my weapons can fire from where I'm standing. So you'll see if I'm too far back and out of range, that will disappear. That means from where I'm trying to end up, I actually can't hit that enemy mech. Whereas if I move a little bit closer, you can see I can hit it at a 30% effectiveness. You can see there's a hit chance at the bottom right corner there. Or if I move a little bit closer to the point that the arrows turn yellow, I now have a 45% chance success. You'll see also the facing marker here has several concentric arches, and these are to indicate the various ranges of various weapons, where they overlap or where they're sort of isolated off in the distance or up close. Weapons have minimum ranges and they have maximum ranges, and they also have optimal ranges. So you'll want to use that as a guidance system for when you move your mech around. So let's kick this off. Let's get some shots in. We're going to move our Buckshot, or rather we're going to move our Thunderbolt up here, facing in the right direction. As we get closer, we see this little animation, and we'll get a chance to open fire. Again, just the one weapon can fire from this distance. We have attack automatically selected. If I had more than one mech visible or sensor locked, I could actually multi-target, because again, that's an ability that this mech warrior has. But it's not the case. We're just going to attack the Locust over here. So we'll click on it, left mouse button, and you can see again that same card that we saw earlier with all the status details and information. You can also see this glowing red line around the mech shape. Now that tells us where damage is going to land most likely. If you're on the left of the mech, it'll highlight the left. If you're on the right, it'll highlight the right. If you're behind it, it'll highlight the rear. And as you can see, rear armor is very minimal, so oftentimes you'll try to get behind a mech to open fire. However, we just have this central head-on shot over here, and it's not even going to be all that accurate. If we hover over the weapon, you can see exactly what the modifiers are. Now those +4s and +2s are actually bad for you. This is based off the tabletop system where you're rolling to hit, and so the pluses are actually negative modifiers for your chances to hit. That's why they're in red. You can also see the kind of damage being done here. 4 times 15 damage, 2 times 15 stability damage, because it's a missile, it's a solid projectile kind of hit, and +15 heat is how much heat you're going to take. So we're going to hit fire over here and just watch as these shots go off and land on this Locust. And we're going to see some details here. Those 2s indicate there's some damage happening. If they were in orange, that means there's damage to the structure as opposed to the armor. And you also saw a drop in the evasive capabilities of that mech. And that's reflected here as well, with that chevron having dropped, and even over here with one less chevron. Now, it took a little bit of damage, as we saw, You can see exactly where it took some damage. The right and left torso rather have taken some damage, as indicated by the fact that the armor numbers have been reduced. The central torso has also taken some damage, and later on, as you unlock the ability to call shots and precision strikes in single player, you'll want to focus based on the loadout that various parts of the mech is carrying. For example, the center torso here, not only is that an ideal target because destroying a center torso means the mech is destroyed, but over here, just to entertain me for a moment, the M laser and machine gun ammo is on that center torso. So if destroying the center torso didn't destroy the entire mech, it would at least get rid of that medium laser. That's how you sort of pick and choose your targets. Either way, the enemy decided not to move that turn, so we're going to see what Apex can do in that King Crab. And again, the King Crab also has some LRMs, as you can see, so we can also move into range and try to get some shots. Again, it's not going to be ideal. We're very far away, so we're not going to have perfect hit chances, but a 45%, we'll take it. We'll just nudge up a little bit. And again, in comes the move order, and the next step is to get that attack order in as well. So let's get the attack order into the Locust, and let's see if we can get any damage done this time around. Alright, so we did manage to get some damage in there, and you saw as that entire phase ended and we started back at 4, our sensor lock disappeared before the Locust moved into our visibility range, so we could actually see it now, and it returned some fire as well. Now, let's just take a look at this. You'll see this pip has reduced ever so slightly, and that's to indicate the fact that it's taken some more significant damage to its overall armor, and same thing goes for my Locust as well. As you can see, it has taken a little bit of damage. Now, I've got the option of using either Witness in the Locust or Blockade in the Commando. Depending on your mechs and their loadouts, you'll want to choose accordingly, but in this case, we're going to use Blockade just to focus in on this Locust. Now again, you'll see we've got 3 of these arrows to the side of the mech, and that means all 3 of our weapons can open fire. All 3 of our range varieties can open fire. Now if we're far away, you'll see we have 35, 30, 30 as hit chances, whereas if we're close, we've got 60, 55, and 50. So that being a more vibrant color in this case means we have a higher chance of hitting. So let's get right up in its face and open some shots and see what we can do in terms of damage. And as a result of this damage, we should also see some stability damage happening, because again, we've got some short-range missiles, the SRMs firing away, and that should most certainly cause a little bit of stability damage. So again, we've got this straight red line now to look at, and this straight red line, which was also visible while we were moving around, means we have a direct line of fire, whereas this dotted line over here means that we can see another mech, but none of our equipment can shoot it. And movement shows us that information as well, so you want to keep an eye on that, unlike what I just did now, putting myself at peril, because this thing might respond by firing away. In fact, this Commando has a couple SRMs, so maybe I'm safe. I should be out of its range, though it might be able to move in. Either way, let's open fire now into this Locust and see what we can do here. Again, you can see some status effects there. Structure exposed. That means we've done enough damage to armor at some point to actually open up potential damage to the structure, maybe break an arm or a leg. So let's take a look at that when our turn comes up. Again, we're just going to right-click on the Locust over here, and you can see that right arm over here with that machine gun has lost all of its armor and is starting to take damage to its structure. If the structural damage reaches 0 on the right arm, the arm will be lost, and it might cause an explosion, damage the pilot, and cause an injury. You'll also notice over here and over here we have this growing ever so slightly by a whole pip. Now, as these go higher and higher, as I mentioned earlier, a mech can become unstable, and it can even topple over if this fills up entirely. If one of the legs is broken, completely destroyed, then there's actually a permanent red pip that will be added over here instead, meaning that it can never go all the way back. Now, one way to remove stability damage is to use bracing, which is an option over here, but that doesn't allow you to attack. Now, while we have Locust selected, you can see we're actually close enough to engage the enemy Locust in melee. We've got 2 machine guns on Witness's Locust, and the machine guns are actually close quarters weapons. They're support weapons, and that means they'll fire alongside the melee attack. Now, when I select this Locust here, again, I'm doing a head-on attack, so we're just going to strike in a central location, but I can actually turn these weapons on and off. Right now I have no reason to turn them off. We'll keep them both on, and let's get this attack going here. Taking risks in this battle. Don't take this as tactical advice. So take a look at this. We got the melee attack in there, and now we're going to open up fire with our machine guns as well. There's a chance that we might hit the enemy mech's head. There's a chance we might cause some injuries to the pilot. Now, the enemy moves in with its thunderbolt, and it's going to probably do a fair bit of hurt.
Reporting minimal damage.
Alright, so what you saw there was the enemy mech performing a multi-target attack. First it hit the commando, and it caused a fair bit of hurt to that center torso, as you can see, and it also caused a decent amount of damage to stability over here. So we might want to consider that in the future and position ourselves in a way that doesn't expose our weakened bits, especially, well, that center torso is more or less always exposed. The Locust here as well, you can see, has a little bit of damage to the right torso, so we might want to in future rotate it so the right torso isn't facing the enemy. Back here, it's Buckshot's turn, and we can actually move forward and respond with a multi-target shot of our own. Now you can see as I'm moving around, these arrows around the mechs show exactly how many weapons can make good and mediocre hits. Now, over here you can see this red line turns into a dark red in the middle over here. That means it is an obstructed line of fire. I can still open shots, but my chances of hitting are much lower, so I might opt to not do that. Instead, if we move the mouse around a little bit, you can see we'll find a spot where we can actually fire on both of these mechs without any obstruction. So what we're going to do is we're going to move in there, we're going to turn to face the right direction here, and just force the Thunderbolt out into the water to open some shots and show you how multi-target works. Now, multi-target is only available to mech warriors who have that ability. Not every mech warrior is able to multi-target. So we're going to select multi-target, and now we select our Alpha and our Bravo. Now, both of these guys will be targeted, but don't make the mistake to just click fire. You have to designate which weapon fires on which mech. So we're going to say our medium lasers here are all going to, well, they actually don't have the option on firing on the Locust there. Let's see, there we go. Our large laser there can fire on the Thunderbolt, and our LRMs there have range to fire on the Thunderbolt as well. So we've got all of these focusing in on the Locust, and these two focusing in on that Thunderbolt. You'll notice, though, if we zoom in here, our friendly mech is a bit of an obstruction for these shots as well. So it's a dangerous shot to take, but we're going to take it, and let's see what happens here.
Okay.
Commander. Armor breach. Internal damage. My armor's getting ripped off.
Alright, so that King Crab came in and did a lot of work, but we did a little bit of work as well. Let's take a look at this Locust. You can see now the damage chart has been updated as we have blown that right arm right off. It is actually a complete gap over here. It's black. There's nothing to show anything left. The rest of the body has taken a fair bit of damage as well, so as you can see, from white to dark grays and blacks is the color scheme for the amount of damage being done there. If we take a look at our Locust over here, you can see we've actually lost our right arm as well as our right torso here. So a very tough spot. More shots to the right arm location or the right torso location will now be relocated to the center torso location. And as I said earlier, if we lose that center torso, this mech is going to blow. So I need to be very wary of that. You'll also notice we're almost at the unsteady marker over here, so another thing for me to be careful about. Unfortunately, it's not that mech's turn, it is our own King Crab's turn. And this time you can see we've got many more red lines popping out. That means we have more opportunities to open fire with our various armaments. Unfortunately, we are limited in our long-range capabilities to the same weapon, so it's not like we can just focus in with everything or focus on everything. Instead, let's try and spread the love a little bit between the Locust and the other enemy mech that we've been firing on from the beginning, just to get some damage in. Focus fire is usually the ideal way to go, but just to showcase how this works, again, we can shift exactly what we're using, and if you can't fire upon anything, it'll actually turn off. Now, this is a perfect example of showing you a damage arc coming only to the left side of the mech. If we look at the Locust instead, you'll see we're able to hit it in sort of a more central location, whereas when we're looking at the Thunderbolt, you'll see because of the angle it's standing on, we're only going to fire to this one side. So let's open shots and cause a little bit of damage here. Alright, so we did just see that Locust get disarmed, pun entirely intended, but because it does have that medium laser on the central torso, it is still actually able to fire, because it's not actually disarmed, guys, it just lost its arms. Over here as well, if we look at the Thunderbolt, you'll see all of the damage concentrated on this one side. So most of this armor has actually been chipped away, and now we can focus in on that one side to try and remove some of these pieces from the mech. The other side is largely still okay. Now let's take a look at Witness down here and see what we can do with Witness. Maybe we can move forward and try and strike this Locust in the back. Here's how we can figure out exactly how to move for that. Now if I zoom in a little bit, or all the way, you'll see this little ring around the enemy mech. Depending on where my move is going to end, I can see which arc I'll be firing into. So as you can see, I can only fire into the front, left, or right of this mech, or I guess it's the other way around for, you know, looking from the mech's perspective here, but I can't actually get behind the mech no matter where I go, so I might be better off just staying put, because of course if I expose myself by moving out all the way over there, I am, well, exposing myself to these three other mechs, as you can see, because these red lines are all going to point towards me. So instead, maybe we fall back into safer distance here, turn around to face that front arc, and try to get some shots in there. If we're lucky, we'll be able to hit that central torso and destroy that mech once and for all. So again, we're in attack mode. Focus in over here, and you'll see we have range across the entire front. Hopefully we'll hit that center torso. It's all a matter of luck, which we don't have, as the case might be. So each time an attack has gone in as well, you will have seen some status updates coming in. Right arm lost, left arm lost, legs being lost, torsos being shot off. It's a good idea to keep an eye on those things, but it's not essential because, again, you can always right-click on a mech to get some more details. Oh, now this is actually becoming a serious problem. This hasn't been filled up just yet, so I don't need to worry about it just yet, but it might become a problem soon if I don't do anything about it. Over here as well, you can see we're losing some evasive pips, and we're also taking some damage over here. That's fine. This is just a UI tutorial. I don't actually care to win over here.
My head.
Alright, Blockade, it's your turn. Again, if we stay put here, we might take a lot of stability damage. Now, typically what I'd do is I'd fall back and I'd brace to remove that stability damage that's been done here, but because this is a tutorial, let's show you what it looks like when we actually get knocked down. Well, in an attempt to show you what it looks like when a mech gets knocked down, it seems I've actually lost two of my mechs instead. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll a clip from my single-player campaign that I'm playing, so you can see exactly what happens when this bar does get filled up all the way to the end, causing a mech to fall over. Once a mech falls over, it'll actually be susceptible to called shots when it comes time to fire or precision strikes here. Now you can see in multiplayer, once the Fury bar hits 100, you can actually use precision strikes on standing mechs as well, but they basically allow you to select exactly where you want to hit to land. I'm going to use a little bit of campaign footage to exemplify that as well.
All weapons committed.
And that should cover all aspects of the tactical user interface to help you really understand what's going on at any given moment on the battlefield. If you'd like to see more BattleTech content, make sure you subscribe to this channel. And if you have any thoughts for what needs to be covered, or have any tips relating to the user interface of your own, feel free to share them in the comments down below. Till next time, thank you very much for watching, and cheers.